Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this LinkedIn Live for the European Organization Design Forum. We have a great guest today. He's been working in organizational transformation for 40 years. We talk a lot about transformation. We talk about organizational excellence, high-performing organizations, these kind of abstract terms. But what do those things really mean? So today we have a guest who really will be able to give a compelling vision of kind of how you can specifically develop your organization in a way that will create a high-performing, excellent business. So I'd like to introduce Dean Meyer. He's the author of 8 books. He's a former columnist for CIO Magazine, coach to CIOs, strategist behind countless org transformations. Please welcome Dean. We're going to be talking today about the Organizational Excellence Self-Assessment for Executives, which is a guide for how to assess an organization's need for transformation beyond just marginal continuous improvements in the operating model. So, Dean, I'm so happy to have you here. And
Thank you. It's a delight to be with you. Thanks, Heather.
Great. So let's get started. So, Dean, you have a ton of experience with organizations. I know that you've worked with a lot of different orgs over the years, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of patterns, noticed a lot of good things and bad. I'm curious to know, when you enter an org, how do you know if it's a good org or a bad org that needs a lot of help?
You make me feel so old, Heather. Watch it, kid.
Sorry.
Well, I think the best way to answer that, how to know a good organizational design from a bad one, the best way to answer that is to give you a taste of a workshop that I developed. It's designed for executives and their senior leadership teams to define the stakes, what organizational excellence really is, but also to build a consensus on the kind of organization they want to build and on the need for change. So what do you think, Heather? Would you like to role play as if we're actually running that workshop for an executive team where you're the executive?
Sure. All my dreams. Yes, let's do it.
Okay, and those in attendance, if you'd like to play along, get out a paper and pen. I'm going to ask you to write down 10 words. I'll come to that in just a moment. But as you go through this, if you're a CEO or a department leader like a CIO, if you're an in-house organization design or organizational effectiveness consultant, think about your own organization. If you're an independent consultant like you, Heather, I want you to pick your favorite client and answer me as if you are that client. Think about your favorite client as we go through this. And if you're none of the above, well, okay, I guess it's nap time. Okay. And as we're going through this, picture what it would be like to actually do this in the organization with your executive team. Now, Heather, let me tell you how it works. I'm going to tell you 10 words, one at a time. I'll tell you a word, and I'd like you to write it down. Okay, pen ready to go. Then give me a minute or two to define what I mean by it. Now, you will have heard most of these words, and you'll have your own thoughts about what they mean, but just allow me to define it my own way this time. And once I've defined it, I want you to put a check mark by the word if it's both critical to your organization and it needs work. Critical and needs work. Check it off. Which is another way of saying put a check mark by it if it's worth investing in. If it needs investment, if it's worth investment. Heather, is that clear?
Yes, I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, here's your first word. The first word is scalability. And the definition of this one is simple. An organization should be able to grow in both size and diversification without any fundamental change to the organizational operating model, without the need for significant reorganizations or other significant material changes in the operating model. Definition clear?
clear for me. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention, anyone watching, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments box and we will pick them up. Sorry.
Great. Yeah. All right. So put a check by scalability if it's important to your organization and needs work. That is, you're not confident of that trait. Next, the next hallmark of organizational excellence, a really commonly used word these days, is agility. We're living in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous. Organizations have to be able to adapt very quickly. So the definition of agility to me is the organization is able to marshal its capabilities around a variety of new initiatives, often happening in parallel, very quickly to address an ever-changing strategic mix of initiatives. Again, without any fundamental change in the organizational operating model. Significant new strategies shouldn't have to restructure. The organization just dynamically reconfigures its capabilities to address it. Is that clear?
Yes, that is clear. That is a tough one, I think.
Put a check by it if it's important and needs work. Now, at the same time, hallmark number 3 is stability. So write that down, stability. And what I mean by that is, people come and go. Technologies evolve, methods evolve, change is constant. As the world changes and as people come and go, the organization should never need a significant restructuring or fundamental change in its operating model. It's fundamentally stable. The best way to handle a VUCA world is with a stable organizational design. Is that clear?
That is clear.
No more organization du jour or restructuring every time someone changes jobs. That's number 3. Number 4 out of 10, innovation. Now, I do not mean some sort of skunk works or R&D group or innovation group that does all the future thinking for the whole organization. Yes, I'm aware of Clay Christensen's work and others who've talked about the bimodal organizations. It's not a great idea for many reasons. For one reason is you've now built a bottleneck for learning in one little group, and that one little group can't possibly have all of the smarts, all of the knowledge and intelligence of the organization as a whole. Furthermore, you've denied everybody else in the organization of the fun part of the job, thinking about the future and innovating. So a mark of excellence, a hallmark of excellence in organization design is innovation is everywhere. Every group innovates within its own domain. Everybody has an opportunity to think about the future and grow. Innovation everywhere. Is that clear?
That is clear, yes.
Check it off if it's important and needs work.
Okay.
Number 5. Okay, this is 2 words, but it's one thought. Okay.
We'll let it
Acquisition integration. Now, when you do an acquisition, and by the way, the same is true of consolidating into shared services. That's another form of acquisition, if you will. So whether it's consolidation or acquisition, when you do an acquisition, you pay synergy value. That is, you pay more than book value or market value because you're expecting it to be worth more when it's integrated with the rest of the company. And something like 9 out of 10 acquisitions fail to achieve their aspirations in synergy value. The problem is slow and ineffective integration, organizational integration. Now, what we're looking for is two-way synergies. We acquire a company, that company should benefit from all the rich depth of capability of the enterprise. Meanwhile, the whole enterprise should benefit from not just the products and services we've acquired, but all of the talent and capabilities that we've got, the assets and everything else. Full two-way integration. Excellence in organization design achieves full two-way integration in a matter of months, typically around 4 months. not the typical 2 to 3 years that's common wisdom in the M&A field. So rapid and complete acquisition integration. Clear?
Yes.
Check it if you need it. Now let me switch for the other 5, the other half of the hallmarks, to hallmarks that affect what it's like to work here. Hallmarks that make this a truly great place to work, an employer of choice. And I'll start with domains, the boundaries around each group. Domains should be very clear, not just a few words in a box. And as we look across the organization, whether that's your department or the whole enterprise, as we look across the organization, there are no gaps, no overlaps. No gaps in domains means everything we could ever want to do now and into the future is covered somewhere, even if it's just a few hours a year for now. Somebody owns it. Because wherever there's a gap, we're not going to be keeping up with the pace of innovation in the industry. We're not going to be delivering that with world-class excellence. We may not even know about the possibilities that line of business creates and that technology creates. No gaps and no overlaps, because when domains overlap, that's like paying people to compete with one another. Well, don't we have enough competition outside? You pay people to fight, they fight. People do what you pay them to do. So domains are crystal clear, no gaps, no overlaps. Understood?
Yes, understood.
Check it if it needs work. Next hallmark, teamwork. There's a lot more to teamwork than good interpersonal relations. In fact, if you figure all of the people who teamed somehow to make this LinkedIn Live possible today, there are hundreds of people at LinkedIn and in the networks and everywhere else that you and I have never met. But it all came together and created this event. You want to try something really complicated? How do we build a team that pours you a cup of coffee? Well, we got to tell the farmer how many beans to plant. We've got to arrange for a truck to harvest the beans and bring them to a dock where there's a ship waiting, sails to UVA-Loran satellites, where there's a train car waiting to a roasting plant with natural gas, and on and on. Half the world's population probably conspired to get you that cup of coffee this morning. That's teamwork. It's not about interpersonal relations. Within organizations, cross-boundary teams should form dynamically, just the right people for the challenge at hand. I'm not talking about a fixed team as in process engineering. Process engineering is only appropriate for routine, well-structured processes, assembly lines, that sort of thing. But for most of white-collar work, we're not assembly lines. We need to be able to bring together just the right people from anywhere in the organization onto teams dynamically at just the right time. When you're done, you're done. It's not the same team for the whole project or service. When you're done, you're done. And within the team, there's a single point of accountability for the entire deliverable, for the entire project or service. And everybody within the team has clear individual deliverables, clear individual results. Not this one for all for one, where we all dabble in each other's domains of expertise. Yes, team spirit is nice. It'll lubricate it. It'll make it better. But clear individual accountabilities for sub-deliverables within the team is essential to performance. So teams, cross-boundary teams, form dynamically, not fixed processes. You customize to the needs of each project or service. They form laterally. You don't have to run up the hierarchy to the common boss, which may be the CEO, and back down again. They form laterally, just the right people, just the right time, clear accountability for the whole, clear individual accountabilities within the team. What do you think? Is that a clear definition?
Yes, it sounds like teamwork as kind of an organizational capability rather than thinking in terms of teams.
Yes, it's designed into the organizational operating model. It's not about personal relationships, which are nice and it will help.
Sure.
But this is more fundamental. Okay, check it if you need it. Next is specialization. Hallmark of excellence is it permits a very high degree of specialization. Specialists always outperform generalists. Now, I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, but allow me to explain. Specialists, I should say teams of specialists, always outperform generalists. Specialists keep up with the literature in their fields better. They keep up with innovation. They produce things more reliably because they know how. They've done it before. Their estimates are more reliable. Their delivery is more reliable. Their quality is higher because they know how. Their costs are lower because they don't have to go up the learning curve each time. If you have any doubt, let's say, God forbid, a loved one needs heart surgery. You don't go to your family medicine, primary care, general practitioner for that, do you? You go to a specialist, and not just a cardiologist, cardiac surgeon. Why is that? Specialists outperform generalists because they know how. But of course, you can't afford to specialize if you're not really great at teamwork. So going back a step, if we're not really good at that cross-boundary teamwork, the dynamic process of team formation, what are you going to do? Well, if I can't trust you for help, Heather, I know we get along great, but if I can't trust you for help on my project, I'm going to replicate your skills and do it myself. Teamwork breaks down. Mm-hmm. And we end up with me being more of a generalist. So teamwork is typically the gating factor in a lot of organizations. But if you're really excellent at teamwork, then you can afford a very high degree of specialization. And there's no need for generalists to fill in the spaces between. The team formation process does exactly that. So we have teams of just the right specialists, all with clear individual accountabilities and a clear chain of command within the team. And that is far higher performing than the silo organization where you combine all the specialists you need under one boss and you leave it to the boss to tell people what to do and form teams. Right. So they're two are related, teamwork and specialization. Let's focus on specialization now. I know you don't necessarily want to be one deep, but are you optimizing specialization? That's hallmark number 8. Clear?
Yes.
Okay, then. Number 9 out of 10. And this one is perhaps one of the most important, near and dear to my heart. And it is so important that I call it the golden rule of organizational design. It's that fundamental. And it's simply this. The word to write down is empowerment. And what empowerment means is authorities and accountabilities match. Authorities and accountabilities match. You have all the authority you need to fulfill your accountabilities. No more, because then you'd be denying someone else of authority. No less, because then you wouldn't get the job done. If ever an organization design separates authority from accountability, now I'll use black and white terms here to illustrate the point. I know the world is filled with shades of gray. Just to make the point, if ever you separate authority from accountability, then on one side you have a group with authority without any checks and balances, no accountability. So they can issue all kinds of really stupid commands. They become an unconstrained tyrant. And on the other hand, you've got a group of helpless victims that don't have the authority that they need to get the job done. And when things go wrong, when that group with authority says something dumb, they get the blame. They're in the scapegoat business. It can't work. It can't work in any form. And this impacts the design of structure, the design of metrics, the design of resource governance processes, the design of culture, the design of cross-boundary best practices and processes. Every aspect of organization design is impacted by the golden rule. Authorities and accountabilities must match. So if ever you see like an R&D group doing all the future thinking and then dumping it on you and it's your job to make that real, you're disempowered. A process owner that designs processes and tells you how to do your job and it's your accountability to deliver the results of that process violates golden rule. Can't work. This is really fundamental. Is my description clear, Heather?
Yes, and I agree. I find this one really important, not only for kind of behaving ethically as an org designer and a leader, but I have, as I'm sure everyone has, a lot of experiences with authority and accountability not matched that generates a lot of unnecessary complexity in organizations.
Oh, it's naturally going to generate political fights because let's say
Yes.
you have accountabilities and not sufficient authority. That's unacceptable. What are you going to do? You're going to fight for the authorities
Hmm.
from whoever has them, or you risk failing at your accountabilities. Meanwhile, someone with authority and not sufficient or concomitant accountability, well, there's an easy job. That sounds like fun. They're going to fight to hold on to power.
Yeah.
And it's just, we could go on and on. There's so many
Yes.
examples.
We could have an entire LinkedIn Live just about that, I'm sure.
Imagine like an enterprise architect comes up with a grand design for an IT solution, hands it over to a development group, and walks away. And now the development group builds it and it fails to work. Who's accountable? If ever you tell someone how to do their job and they fail, who's at fault? Did you tell them something stupid or did they perform badly? You can't know.
Right.
So part of empowerment, the golden rule, means we manage people to results. We don't tell them how to get there. Coaching is great, but don't tell them how to get there.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. No questions on empowerment? We'll put a check by it if you feel the organization design that you're thinking of isn't fully there.
All right.
And one final one. The final word, number 10, is engagement, employee engagement. Again, fundamental to organizational performance, as well as retention and job satisfaction and creativity and everything else. But employee engagement is a whole lot more than just having a good boss. Or it's in part having a supportive and inspiring work environment, expectations that are feasible. You don't want to go home at the end of each week feeling you've worked so hard and still failed to meet expectations. Part of it is supportive culture. Part of it is metrics that are controllable and fair. If you're measured on things you can't control, you're going to be very frustrated. Part of it is everybody having growth opportunities. There are many aspects to engagement. The one I want to really focus on today is captured in the word purpose. To me, this is one of the most fundamental drivers of engagement. People have endured really pretty bad work environments when they have a strong sense of purpose. Think about a military squad going into battle. You can't imagine worse work conditions, but what a strong sense of purpose and mission. Now, I define purpose as three things. So understood, purpose is a subset of engagement, but to me, one of the most important ones. I define purpose as three things. Using your unique talents. Number two, to do something hard, something you'll be proud of. Number three, that has value to others. Using your unique talents to do something hard that has value to others. So that's clearly more than bolting a door on a car along an assembly line. How do you know really what you've done and for whom? So, hallmark of excellence is everybody in every group at every level has a strong sense of purpose. Everybody understands that their unique talents are going into doing something hard that has value to others. Everybody. Clear?
Yes, definitely. And that is when I think a lot of orgs are maybe underperforming a little bit on.
So those are my 10 hallmarks of excellence. Yes, I know you can think of a few more. But to me, those really capture the major issues that I run into over the decades in organizational design. So how'd you do, Heather? Thinking about your favorite client, how many did you check off?
I mean, to be honest, I checked off almost all of them. But also I can sense that there is a strong relationship between a lot of them and how they're interconnected. So, how do you decide what to focus on first?
Ah, that's a really key question. Um, and I'm not going to answer it.
Okay,
Well, I'm not going to answer it directly. Here's the deal. You don't want to fix symptoms, you want to fix root causes, yes?
right.
Because if you're fixing symptoms, finger in the dike, you'll be patching things forevermore.
Yeah.
You want to get the root cause. These hallmarks of excellence are all manifestations of the underlying organizational design, the organizational operating model. So we don't want to work on the symptoms. We don't want to work on these 10. Let's not prioritize which of the 10 we want to work on. Let's understand where they're coming from. And that is the underlying organizational operating model. As it turns out, there is one organizational operating model that I'm aware of that delivers all 10 all the time at every level of an organization in any industry, whether that's commercial or government or not-for-profits, in departments within companies, be they IT or public relations, marketing, or HR. There is an organizational operating model that does all 10. Want to hear about it?
Of course, I want to hear about it. I'm on the edge of my
Okay, then. So imagine it's captured in this, the business within a business paradigm. I'm sure everybody's heard of it, but again, let me define it my own way. Let me describe it. Imagine an organization where the hierarchy is still there, the organization chart is still there, but every box on that organization chart is defined as a business within a business. Every box is defined by what business it's in. That means by what it sells. And throughout this conversation, when I say the word sell, please, I'm not talking about money changing hands. I'm not talking about internal chargebacks. You can implement this whole paradigm without internal chargebacks. And in fact, there are some concerns about internal chargebacks that you'd really want to study before going there. Most organizations are nowhere near ready. But so let me use the word sell figuratively. Every box is defined by what it sells, not roles in processes or responsibilities for tasks, such as those crazy RACI diagrams, not vague functions, not competencies, but rather what business you're in. Every group knows what business it's in, and it knows its catalog of products and services, and it knows whom its customers are, whether they're external to the company or others within the company or even others within the immediate department. Everybody recognizes they're there to serve customers. The lines of business, all the possible lines of business you can think of that you need now and as far into the future as you can see, are laid out in this organization chart. And the hierarchy is a great way to ensure that there are no gaps and no overlaps. They're laid out on that organization chart based on fundamental principles of structural design to ensure not only no gaps and no overlaps, but to avoid conflicts of interest and impossible jobs with infeasible requisite variety, and to maximize professional synergies. With that comes a cross-boundary team formation process that's just like things get done in the real world. For any project or service, for any new strategic initiative, there is one and only one group that sells that's in that business. No overlaps. One group is in that business, so they are accountable for the whole. Now think about whether you want to have a house built, so you hire a general contractor, right?
Mhm.
And you say, how much is this going to cost and how long is it going to take? And they say, I'll get back to you. And they quickly call up the electrician and the plumber and the roofer and whoever else they need, right? They form a team, and it's that team that puts together the cost and time estimates right up front. Well, let's use that same market-based process internally. One and only one group that sells that project or service, that product or service, really. Let's call that the prime contractor, like the general contractor on your house. And the first thing a prime contractor does is line up the subcontractors, by which I don't mean contractors outside the company. I mean other groups within the company. So if you're the prime, you say, Dean, I think I need this kind of support from you. I say, I can do that. And so on. So you line up your subs, and I may need to line up my subs to subs. So if you can picture it, through that team formation process, we're gathering together just the right people for this unique project. Everybody is there to deliver results from their catalog of products and services. So clear individual accountabilities, a clear chain of command within the team. So that satisfies the high performance teamwork requirement. Now, go on to imagine that every group has a P&L. It's a business. Every group is a not-for-profit business within a business. Now, some of those groups sell outside, so they have profit margins as a performance metric, as a target, but they don't own the profits. The enterprise does, so that we can redistribute profits from, say, the Boston Consulting Group cash cow to the growth stars. The profits belong to the enterprise so that they can be deployed wherever they're most needed. So at the end of the day, every group is a not-for-profit business within a business. But let's look at those who are in the business of selling the company's products externally to our external customers. And I'm going to call them brand managers. You could call them category managers. I'm not going to say product managers because everybody's a product manager for their own business. So let me say brand manager. I don't mean the marketing function of branding. I mean, they own the brand. They own the IP, the intellectual property that is the brand. They would subcontract for market research to find new market opportunities. They would subcontract for engineering to design a new product. They would subcontract for manufacturing to produce inventory, to logistics, to warehouse and distribute their inventory. They would subcontract to marketing for marketing communications to promote the product. They would subcontract to sales for sales as a service. Sales doesn't sell product. They sell a brokerage service to link up external customers with the brand manager. Oh, my old friend Craig, thank you for that comment. It's good to see you here, my friend. So that's the paradigm. You have a brand manager who subcontracts for all the pieces. In that world, everything is a shared service. Everything is a shared service. The brand manager doesn't need a big staff because everything is available as a shared service. And as a result, we can consolidate everything into shared services and optimize specialization. Can you picture it, Heather?
Yes, it sounds a little bit similar to some things that I've heard, but not quite. I haven't firsthand experienced this kind of way of working, but it sounds very versatile, and that you're establishing a lot of flexibility there with.
It is a little different than commonly cited examples like hire. It is very different from holacracy or sociocracy, where you just take your hands
Right.
off.
There is some contract-based interaction in some of those self-managing models. And then also there is micro enterprises, which is those units are, as far as I know, also managing some type of P&L.
So we got a question. Why would a team choose to subcontract rather than building expertise for himself? As an entrepreneur, I will tell you, I want to focus on org design. I do not want to be in the travel agent business. The more time I spend being a travel agent, the less time I'm focused on my profession. So I subcontract for help, and I travel a lot, as you do, as many of you do. The reason entrepreneurs want to subcontract is so that they don't turn into generalists and lose their competitive advantage, lose their effectiveness. So teamwork is in the interests of the prime. The reason the general contractor hires an electrician is because that electrician can do it better, cheaper, faster than a carpenter trying to figure out the electricity. And of course, there are also codes, building codes and such to be considered. Glenn, does that make sense?
There's a little bit of a delay, so we might see the reply in a second.
So there are some simple things. I don't mean to say you have to subcontract. Like, let's say you've got a professional writing group, tech writers. And does that mean nobody is allowed to write a memo? Of course not. Everybody writes. You're just not allowed to sell writing as a service to others because there are no overlaps. Only the tech writing, the professional writing group, sells editing as a service. But everybody can write. Why would you ever use that group? Whenever you've got something that's critical, that needs to be really well written, then it's to your advantage to use an expert. So teamwork happens. Roger Young, another old friend and a master of individual effectiveness. We work together often. Thanks for your comment.
Nice.
Swati, thank you. I think purpose is so essential to engagement, one of the 10. So that's the vision. Now let's go back over the 10 words, and I hope you all have more questions. Scalability, as we grow, given we have more room for specialization, so a given line of business might split into 2 or 3, whether it splits at the next level down or splits sideways. We are big enough now to afford more than one group. And as a result, we grow without any fundamental change in the organizational paradigm. We want to diversify into a whole new product line. We add a new brand manager. Maybe engineering adds some new disciplines. Maybe manufacturing adds some new stuff. But everybody's just growing within the existing organizational paradigm. So we can scale in both size and diversification without any fundamental change in the operating model. Agility, well, it's that team formation process. No matter what's thrown at us, we can dynamically, on the spot, laterally, not waiting to go up and down the hierarchy, we can dynamically put together a team, a high-performing team. And of course, every group can be selling to multiple others. So every competency can be on multiple teams. They're there to deliver their catalog of services. So we have the ultimate in agility, built right into the paradigm. Stability, this thing's built on principles, not the personalities of the top few. It's built on principles, and then names are plugged in. So there's no reason to have to change the organization design when people change jobs or when new technologies and new methods come in. Every group is accountable for innovation, and it could split out new subdomains. As far as innovation, everybody's an entrepreneur. You're not just accountable for delivering today's products and services. You're accountable for some near-term stuff like customer satisfaction, employee engagement, planning your own business, competitive rates. And in the longer term, you're accountable for innovation because you've got to keep your little business within a business competitive. So innovation is everywhere. Now, that means you need funding. You can't be selling all your hours to customers on projects. You've got to reserve some hours for sustenance activities like innovation and process improvement and business development, relationship building, planning your own business. So when we look at our economic processes, I call it the internal economy, the resource governance processes, we've got to be sure that when we look at what budgets pay for in the way of deliverables, we've got to be sure we've set aside time for those sustenance activities for the business within a business. Innovation everywhere. Acquisitions integration. I'll talk about my friend Sergio Pais at PDC in Guatemala. He buys a company. He maps all the lines of business within that company. They all map into existing shared services, except for this new product line we got, which becomes a new brand manager. That brand manager instantly has access to all of the capabilities of the whole mothership. And all of the existing shared services now have some influx of new talent. So when he bought a company in Peru, manufacturing inherited a plant in Peru. Sales inherited sales in Peru. Logistics inherited a warehouse and transport in Peru. And we got a new product line that instantly started being sold globally. Full-way, two-way synergy. Sergio does that repeatedly in about 4 months. Teamwork, well, I guess I've already described that. The prime sub notion, specialization, I already described that because you're focused on lines of business that only works because of teamwork. Empowerment, you're managed by results. Customer and supplier come to an agreement, and now the supplier once committed to delivering something, is free to deliver that in the best way they know how. Another old friend, Jeff Parker. Good to see you here. So empowerment is inherent in this model, just as it is out there in the real world. And engagement, well, you can imagine this is a great place to work. Expectations match resources because as a seller, you don't commit to do things you can't deliver, and you're empowered to say no. Culture is team-oriented, creative. Everybody has opportunity to grow as you grow your business and find ways to add more value to the enterprise. But the key is everybody has a sense of purpose. Every little group knows it's there to produce products and services that are of value to customers who are often people sitting across the hall from them in a neighboring group, people they know. Every group has a sense of purpose. So that business within a business paradigm answers all 10 all at once. You don't have to set priorities. Heather, shall we look at some questions?
Yeah, I think there was one that came in, a follow-up from Clem. Yeah, there it is.
Choose to do it themselves rather than rely on another team. So, Clem, root cause? What's the root cause there? Must be something broken in the teamwork process. Could be internal economy. That is, love to help you, brother, but I don't have time. I'm already overcommitted on other stuff. If we're setting priorities, if each manager sets priorities for her own group, teamwork breaks down. Because if your highest priority is my lowest, you're not going to get much help from me, right? So priority alignment is part of what I call the internal economy. Under the whole teamwork process is built into structure. You know, the word structure means two things. The organization chart defines people's specialties, and that cross-boundary teamwork process puts them back together to get work done. You can't change one without the other. So when I say structure, I mean both. Organization chart and the cross-boundary teamwork process. So to get teamwork going, and metrics, for example, of customer satisfaction, where the customer is that group across the hall that's asking for your help. All of the organizational systems need to be aligned ultimately someday to get things to work. So Clem, what you're seeing there is a symptom, and you've got to diagnose root causes and decide which of those fundamental organizational systems are undermining teamwork that would cause people to do it themselves and become generalists.
And then we have
Roger.
this question from Roger. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Roger. Honestly, this is not going to sound good, but Roger, you know me, you know how blunt I can be. The biggest challenge I've had over the decades is senior leadership's short-term thinking. We've got to make our quarterly numbers for Wall Street. I'm only going to be on this job a year or so, and then I'll rotate out. I don't have time to leave a legacy. Or just get into firefighting mode. And there are always, a cat, welcome. There are always plenty of fires to be fought, and unless you can just accept some fires and focus on the systemic issues, you'll be in firefighting mode forever. And there are a lot of leaders like that. So the biggest challenge is finding a leader that really wants to leave the legacy of a truly great organization and is willing to get there in a fully participative way, which takes time. Over the course of 3 to 5 years, this is not a quick fix. That's been my frustration over the years. Thank you, Jonathan. Other questions?
Let's see if we missed any.
Or challenges?
I One thing that I'm curious about as I'm listening to you speak about this, and I think that probably anyone who has done sort of consulting in this way has encountered that type of leader that you're describing, that sort of is concerned with the short-term gain, or wants to do a reorg because they just kind of want to make a splash, but not necessarily. I think this is sort of a pattern that we see that contributes to this reorgs every couple of years with the trend. Um, One of the things that often makes leaders and managers resistant to change, of course, is that they think, what does it mean for me? So I'm curious to know, in this model, what does it mean for those people who are maybe managers or other executives? How does it transform sort of their role and contribution?
Oh, very interesting. Well, first, one thing it means is they've got to take a bit of risk. Unless you're the CEO, but even there, you've got to tell the board that they've got to accept a period of investment before this paradigm really starts to pay off. They've got to take a bit of risk and fight for it, and fight for patience. That's one of the big stumbling blocks there. They've got to be brave. And Jan, excellent point. I'll come to that in a second. What does it mean for them day to day once implemented? It means that they're not a cog in the machine. They rise above and get to drive that machine. They're the designer of the machine. So they get to work at a much more strategic level. They shouldn't get dragged down into a lot of day-to-day tactical details. They're going to say, oh, I got people for that, and stay focused on the big picture, on continued organizational improvements, and on strategy. As Sergio down in Guatemala says, I'm amazed at how much gets done without my even being involved. It's an amazingly high-performing organization. So they become, there's still a role of hierarchy for performance management and for filling those interstitial spaces with communication and coordination. There's a lot going on. They're just not micromanaging, out of the micromanaging business, out of getting dragged down into tactical details. So,
So that question from Jan, I think, is a good segue from what you just said. Those leaders are so rare. That's been my experience as well. So how do you, and also what Swati said is, how do we ensure that people understand these nuances and are brought in?
those two are related. Thank you both. What do you think of doing this workshop in-house? Can you picture that? What if we can at least get to those leaders, maybe arrange a call with me and somehow talk them into doing this for their leadership teams, the executive and the leadership team? I've done that a number of times. Even though this is a fairly recent tool that I'm only just releasing now, I've done that enough times to see that it really gets the whole leadership team thinking about where are we going with this organization, and gets them to coalesce around that shared vision. And it really brings to the table the need for change, and builds a commitment of change in the whole leadership team. So when an executive sees his or her entire leadership team getting behind it and saying, well, let's go. Come on, boss, don't get in the way. Let's pave the way. That could push it over the top. Now, I said 3 to 5 year process. There are 5 organizational systems that together add up to the ecosystem we work in. These are attributes of the machine, not raw material flowing in or product flowing out. So strategy is not on the list. People is not on the list. These are attributes of the machine, by which I mean the organization side. 3 big ones: structure, which you know is org chart plus teamwork process, cross-boundary teamwork. Internal economy, which is all the resource governance processes. That's budgeting, demand management, and priority alignment, and after the fact accounting, although that's the least important. Number 3 is culture, the way we work around here. Of those 3, that's the easiest one to fix. We can bring about massive cultural change in large organizations in less than a year. If you're curious about that, talk to me. And then 2 minor ones: best practices, cross-boundary processes, process engineering. and metrics and consequences. Those are for fine tuning. They don't fundamentally change the paradigm, but they make it work better and better and better over time. So 3 to 5 years is to get the overall outlines in place of a business within a business organization, especially focusing on the big three: structure, internal economy, and culture. And then we go into continuous refinement mode with best practices and processes and metrics and consequences. Craig, the partnerships you build with a leadership team to build a shared vision. Craig, that is really the way the process starts. If we do this workshop in-house and the team says, we really want to do this. This is fun. This will really make a difference in the world. And the leader says, okay, I'll pave the way here. One of the first things we do is craft a very clear vision of the end state. I shouldn't call it vision, because a lot of people think of vision as some cutely worded little paragraph, to be a world-class supplier of beautiful products and services to make our customers gobs of money. That's not what I'm talking about. Let me call it a blueprint, a detailed description, 15, 20 pages, detailed description of how this organization will work when we're there. How will we treat customers? How will we treat staff? How will we treat innovation? How will we manage our assets? Detailed vision based on the business within a business paradigm. And then we take them through a process of measuring how they're doing today. That is, measuring the gaps. I use a simple scale, 0 to 3. 3 means we're nearly there. 2 is well on the way. 1 is barely begun, and 0 is we're nowhere. And the zeros and ones we treat as gaps. But again, don't treat symptoms. So we look at the gaps and note that this is gaps against the vision, not fires we're fighting today. We diagnose the root cause of the gaps. Why would our great people produce a 0 or 1, produce a gap here? Could it be structure? Could it be culture? Could it be processes? Could it be metrics? And through that, they're going to see that so many of their gaps point to the same handful of root causes. And now they understand the need for systemic change, and it's just a matter of sequencing it. And we have a multi-year plan. So that's how I get a leadership team going. Thanks, Craig, for that. To Jan's point, this by its nature builds that notion of internal supply chains. So one really critical step in the structure process, we design the org chart. That is, we lay out all the lines of business, design the organization chart. We craft clear domain statements, not just a few words in a box, catalogs of products and services, and then we do what I call walkthroughs. Here's a project. Who's the prime? Prime, what subs do you need? Subs, do you need any subs? And the first walkthrough is awful. It takes them a day and a half, and it's grueling. And the next walkthrough, less than a day, and the third walkthrough, less than half a day. When you've got your leadership team to the point where you could present any challenge and get a walkthrough on the spot that's pretty much the same answer that everybody else on the leadership team would give, now we're ready to go prime time. So we practice lots and lots of walkthroughs, primes and subs to subs, all different kinds of projects and services until the leadership team is really ready. Then we can roster our staff and our assets and our vendors and go live with it. So lots of planning before go live. Okay. And that's how we understand the value chains within the organization.
Okay. We got one last question here from Ada. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And then I think we'll need to wrap up because we're almost through the hour. But this is a very interesting question as well. What can tech, CIO, and people leaders do to improve their strategic relevance using your approach? That's a big question.
I'm honored. Thanks for coming. Aid is a brilliant futurist on the topic of organizations and leadership. And he's another one I'd recommend you reach out to and connect to on LinkedIn. A CIO is an example of someone who can implement this within IT. IT has all of the lines of business that entire companies have within it. It has heavy manufacturing, customer service, all kinds of layers of engineering. It has sales in the form of business relationship managers and all kinds of planning and coordination functions. So it is a complete business within a business. What a CIO should be thinking about is implementing this model within IT. And there's no excuse. You don't have to wait for the rest of the company to come along. I've done this many, many times over the years. In fact, much of my frameworks and processes were developed within large IT departments, 1,000-person IT departments. CHROs, I would say the same to them, but they have an added responsibility here. CHROs are also complete businesses within a business. They have ongoing service providers, they have layers of engineering, they wouldn't use that word, but specialists in designing various things. And they have the business partners that are essentially their sales function. So they should be pioneering and implementing this within their own HR departments. But in addition, sometimes HR is confused with organizational engineering or organizational effectiveness, or in Europe, organization design. Now, it turns out, I'll call it OE, organizational engineering or organizational effectiveness, to distinguish it from OD, organization development, which is totally different. OD is within HR. OE generally should not be within HR for a variety of reasons. But sometimes leaders look to HR for guidance on organization design. The most important thing they could do is recognize this as a distinct profession. It is not organization development. It's an engineering science, and it requires its own separate function, its own separate group. Are we out of time?
We are out of time, but I would urge this last questioner to reach out to Dean directly. He's very accessible. And the rest of you, if you would like to learn more, you can also find one of Dean's books. His capstone book, How Organizations Should Work, is very interesting. And of course, Dean is available for private calls and advice and all those kind of things. I really appreciate your time, Dean. This has been really interesting and edifying for me. And we had a lot of nice guests here. And I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. And yeah, thanks everybody for spending some time with us this afternoon.
I'll add my thanks to you, Heather, and to Tina Bieber, who helped organize this. And thanks to all of you for coming. Really, if you're interested in talking to me, please reach out and connect on LinkedIn. If you'd like to speculate about doing a workshop like this in-house, a lot of times you can talk me into doing it for free. So let me hear from you. Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks again, Heather.
Thanks everyone.